Hello, Planeswalkers. Welcome to the third episode of the Lotus Archives. Today, myself, Nick, and my buddy Jack here.
Hello, everybody.
We're going to be talking about aggro. Last episode, we touched base on a little bit of everything and the different archetypes that you could be playing while you're playing a game of Commander at your table. So, aggro. Jack, what is your definition of aggro? We're going to go a little bit more of a deep dive than we did last week here.
Right, yeah, I kind of just really analyze it. And, for me, when I hear aggro, I think burn. I think that age-old strategy of burn the opponents quickly, set the world on fire. Yeah, because I used to play a lot of Legacy and Modern. So in those formats, burn was the cheapest, easiest, most gung-ho way to do it.
So I'm going to stop you right there real quick. For those of our listeners that are new to the world of Magic and trading card games in whole, what exactly is the burn strategy? Like, what is the point of burn?
So what sets the burn bit apart from like a different style of aggro, which we'll get into, is that it's just mono red first and foremost. It's basically like they call it red deck wins. Sometimes in other formats, right? So the first commander that I can go into here with this is Sulfin Mayhem Dominus. He's kind of that new red guy from like the All Will Be One Phyrexian stuff. You remember that whole crazy stuff, the Dominus cycle?
Oh yeah, Phyrexia is always fun.
Right, so like they had these guys that have their unique little perks to them. So Sulfin was the mono red one, and he's got that very unique line of text of that if you would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or permanent they control, you deal double that damage instead. So a lot of like main staple burn cards Lightning Bolt is first and foremost. It's 1 red, deal 3 damage to any target. That's basically all you need to know for burn. That's what it does. You play cheap, fast, easy, get the opponent's life points to 0. That's your main goal all the time.
All right, so with that burn, how would best way I can think of it in my head?
Well, like you've played a burn deck before, right?
Oh,
Have you ever played a...
Oh yeah, I play my own version of a burn deck. Not my favorite strategy to play, but
it can be repetitive. Like I will say that.
Yes,
burn it can be a very repetitive gameplay. Like I know in Legacy, like the 60 card formats, Legacy and Modern, it's the easiest one to get into, but it's also the most repetitive. You're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. It can be very boring.
Yeah, that's kind of what I found when I was playing burn when I first started playing. Now, in the grand scheme of things, my decks, most of them that have red in their color pips, I do play some burn style mechanics. Obviously, Lightning Bolt is a great card, especially when you're on mana curve.
Yep.
Then you got other cards like Grape Shot, Goblin Bombardment, Chandra Torch of Defiance. You got cards like that can definitely help you out and just ping creatures. I mean, when I play burn myself, it's more of a group burn. I'm not a huge fan of single target burn or single player burn, mind me. But it's one of those things for me. I try to build all my decks that they're good in a group format and 1v1 format. And I found myself, when you're playing a burn deck in a group format, a lot of those cards like Lightning Bolt, they aren't the best when you got 3 other guys you're trying to kill.
You have, Lightning Bolt in particular is a card in Commander you won't see that often. In fact, I kind of only put it into like Sulfin just as kind of like a funny haha, like, oh, look at me playing a staple from old school burn.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Lightning Bolt itself, a great card for only one red mana, and
Oh
you
yeah,
automatically deal 3 damage to a creature or player. So it's a great way to just do a single target removal or
yep.
just hit someone for damage.
You can hit a planeswalker with it too.
Exactly.
And with Sulfim, the way that it's built, just going into that one, you can, because it's non-combat damage, you just paid 1 red mana for 6 damage.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, like, that's, I think, another big staple of like a burn strategy is you double up the damage, right? Even in like most aggro decks, or even anything that just runs red, you're gonna run things like, I mean, you could run Sulfim in any red deck that's doing stuff like that. But you've got your other pieces like the Dictate of the Twin Gods that
Yep.
just doubles damage.
Such a great card.
There's that. Oh, what's? I'm drawing a major blank on this. It's one that triples damage. It came out recently.
Oh, I know which one you're
I'm
talking
actually
about.
scrolling through my deck list here to see if I can find it. It's an enchantment.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Here we go. Fiery Emancipation.
Yes.
So this is a 3 colorless, 3 red enchantment. If a source you control will deal damage to a permanent or player, triple that damage to that player instead. Which, like,
Yeah.
that's just, I mean, okay, now I'm doing 9 damage with 1 red mana. But these stack, like these things, they go on top of each other. So if you have Sulfim plus this, you double it, then you triple it. Just
yeah. I mean, you could also, if you really want to start getting mean, I don't recommend it unless know what you're doing and you know your deck can win quickly. I mean, you got cards like Mana Barbs, which is
Yep.
3 in a red. Whenever a player taps land for Mana Barb steals 1 damage to that player. I mean, that's just mean.
That's going to add up really quick. People, you get to the late game, you're playing all these spells, and they want to cast big stuff, right?
Oh, God. I mean, then you got cards like Rolling Earthquake.
Yep.
It's an X and a red sorcery. Rolling Earthquake deals X damage to each creature without horsemanship and each player. So, realistically, unless you're playing an older player that played during the original Kamigawa, they're probably not going to have any cards with horsemanship.
Yeah,
It
no,
was
you
such a
never see
niche
that.
tribal format with that horsemanship. It was kind of almost similar to how flying is today. And
yeah, it was like an old school. It's like almost like Shadow, I think, is one where it's like they can't block it unless they also have it.
yes, yeah, I believe it's Shadow.
Pretty sure. Yeah. Well, I know my Sliver deck, which we can get into Slivers too, is there's that Shadow one where like, oh, only things with Shadow can block it, but then only the things with Shadow can only block things that also have Shadow.
Yeah.
So it opens you up. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, oh, well, I can't be blocked, but then I also can't block you now. But we're getting ahead of ourselves with that one.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But, so with Burn, you said your current favorite deck is Sulfime.
Sulfim, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. But there's a good number of other ones out there.
Yes, and you could start looking into Burn isn't always just mono red.
Correct.
You could technically do a mono black Burn deck as well. And one of the commanders that comes to light to me would be someone like Sire Conrad the Grim. He's 3 black and black for a 5/4 legendary human knight creature. Whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, Sire Conrad the Grim deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then his subtext is 1 in a black. Each player puts the top card of their library into the graveyard. Yes, it's adding a little bit of graveyard shenanigans into it, but
who doesn't love that though?
Oh God! In a roundabout way, you could look at that as a form of a pseudo burn, because you got cards like Fate Unraveler.
Yep.
You got cards like Ecor Rats. mean, Igor Rats is more of infect, but
Yeah.
you got Fate Unraveler, which is 3 and a black for 3/4 enchantment creature hag. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Fate Unraveler deals 1 damage to that player. Now you can put Underworld Dreams on there too, which is 3 black pips, that is,
Yep.
for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dreams deals 1 damage to him or her. That's an automatic 2 damage to someone right as they're just at their draw step.
Just
And
for
there's
playing the
nothing they
game.
can do about it.
Like, they
So,
just want to do the basic thing, and bop, there it goes.
exactly. And as you know, Jack, there's a bunch of cards out there: mono black, mono red, and even some in Mardu and Rakdos.
Boros Burn is one that is quite popular out there as well. There's that Minotaur duo that
Oh,
has they give their red instants and sorceries lifelink.
yes. You are talking about oh, what the hell is their name? They were box topper for a couple sets ago.
Yeah, they literally just popped into my head.
A couple years ago, not a couple sets.
It was a while back I got them. So with Fire Song and Sunspeaker,
Yes, that's it.
they are it's kind of like a duo in one card. It's 4 red and white, so 6 mana for a Minotaur Cleric 4/6. Gives red instants and sorceries you control lifelink, and whenever a white instance or sorcery spell causes you to gain life, Fire Song and Sunspeaker deals 3 damage to a creature or player.
I mean,
So
for a Boros deck, that's perfect way to add in some burn mechanics if you're looking to go Boros.
oh
Which
yeah,
Boros generally you don't see it too often go burn. You mostly see Boros as tokens and more of a Pillow Fort or a enchantment
you have like
style deck.
equipments and stuff. Yeah, equipments and
Yeah.
auras, like that Voltron strategy that we'll get into too in a second here. But Boros Burn from I know this is dating myself too back to the 60 card formats. Boros Burn was actually one of the only other subsections of Burn that you would see. Like, you'd either see the mono red version, or you'd see people dabble into the Boros, where you would get things like Lightning Helix that does 3 damage and you gain 3 life. Things like that, where it adds a bit of life gain to it, so that, which is, Burn's worst nightmare, is going against somebody that's gaining life, since all you're trying to do is burn them
Take their
down.
life away.
The last thing you want is them to gain that life back. So the Boros one kind of adds a bit of, extra layer to it, and almost gives it a little bit more utility, I think.
Yeah,
How it goes about it.
Yeah, because then you could start diving into life gain and cards like we've talked about last episode, Aether Flux Reservoir.
Yep.
And you could start working with that sort of stuff because, as you know, Jack, white is very good with life gain.
They are. They have a lot of stuff for that. And while you're, slinging these spells, because the burn is very cheap, right? That's like their kind of reoccurring thing is, they have very cheap spells. Most of the main good burn stuff is at most 4 mana for something. Like, I know one of Chandra's outburst spells, one of her things is 2 in a red here, and they would just, blow stuff up. But that's really their top of the line. Like, their max mana value is usually at 4. So you can play multiples of these in a single turn with that reservoir, rack up your life total, burn one player out, and then just zap the other guy with the deadly laser.
So burn is definitely a viable strategy, and I would say it's probably one of the easiest to someone to just pick up and play. Apart from
it's cheap.
yes,
yeah, not even just mana value, but cost wise too.
Yeah, you could easily make a solid burn deck for fairly cheap because a lot of the burn cards are fairly cheap to buy. I mean, Christ, Lightning Bolt. Yeah, that's wrong.
It's under $1.
I just happened to pull it up on here, and the first card that came up was $800. I'm like, yeah, that's definitely
Easy
not
there.
right.
You don't
But
need to go breaking the bank on the crazy arts. But it's like
but
$1.50. You know, like we pull up EDH rec and we see it's like, I got like $1.50 on most
yeah, I mean,
once here.
and just so everyone out there knows, if you have friends or family that are getting rid of old cards, look
I'll
at
go
them
through that
before you let
stuff.
them chuck them. Because just
Yeah.
right here, limited edition alpha lightning bolt on Card Kingdom, it's going for 800, and TCG player, it's going for $835.
Yeah,
So
those old
before
cards
you
are
throw stuff,
fantastic.
yeah, before you throw stuff out, I would take a look and see what it's worth.
Absolutely.
That could be a little nest egg for you.
Yeah. Now I think if I were to give a baseline for like how much just a straight, maybe like mono red burn deck would be, I'm trying to think what kind of ballpark we're looking at. Somebody wanted to like just get into this and kind of build it from scratch. I'd say you could probably build a really solid, like if we're not counting the mana base, because like
Yeah.
the mana base for a red deck is just mountains. Really, you don't need to go crazy with non-basic lands. You could probably do it for $70, maybe even 50.
Yeah, you could probably do it fairly cheap. I know you're a little bit more up to date on a lot of the burn cards and their pricing than I am. Um, but everything that I've looked up, all those cards are fairly cheap to buy in person. That is, it's just a matter of putting everything together and figuring out what goes with what and making sure you got a half decent mana base.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's see, what would you say would probably be the best card for a burn deck to run?
Oh
Let's kind of
God.
give one of those like, what would you say would be like, because I know red doesn't have that much in tutors, and you probably wouldn't run a tutor in this, but like, say you want to like go through your burn deck and find like your one best card to like amp up your strategy.
Oh
What's your
God.
what's your thoughts on that? What do you what do you think that could be?
I mean, depending on the style of burn deck I was running, that would change it a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
if I was running more of a creature heavy burn deck, I would definitely say a card like Warstorm Surge, which is
Okay.
5 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player. So if you're looking for more of a creature heavy deck with a burn afterthought, that
Hmm.
card's very good. Um, then you also got basic cards like Grape Shot, um, which is 1 and a red. Grape Shot deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Then it also has Storm. When you play this spell, copy it for each spell played before it this turn. You may
I
choose
love
new
Storm.
targets for the copies. Um, for
Storm was
me,
great. I love playing
yes.
Storm.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. For me, burn, it's such a subjective, as with every archetype in Magic,
Yeah.
there's so many different ways that you can actually go ahead and build something up. And it all comes down to personal preference. I know if it's not obvious by now, when I think aggro, I go more creature heavy base decks.
Right.
And I know Jack here, he's all about the spells.
Yeah. I mean, like, for just looking at like Soulfim, right? Like, it's one of my favorite ways of playing a strategy like this, where I think my whole thought process when I went to build Soulfim was just I want to set the world on fire. So some of like my personal favorite cards, and I guess if I were to run a gamble or a tutor in it and want to look for something, I play the deck kind of not suboptimally, but like just to like to have fun and see how much damage I can get out to the board and just literally set everything on fire. So I use a card like Sulfuric Vortex, which is a 1 and 2 red, 3-mana enchantment. Beginning of each player's upkeep, so each player, everybody, this will deal 2 damage to that player. And it also says if a player would gain life, that player gains no life instead.
Yeah,
So
screw
shuts
that.
down life gain and it hits everybody. And a good thing to note with this one for Solfim in particular, because he's got that non-combat damage buff, it only affects your opponents. So when this goes around the table, everyone's getting pinged for 4, but you only take 2. So I'm burning everyone, but I burn me a little bit less.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into more of the what people commonly call group slug style decks,
Exactly, yeah. It's like I'm gonna
where
spread the hate around.
mana barbs would be big into it, and
Yep.
you just want everyone not to have fun playing the game.
In a sense, yeah. You want to spread. It's like I think yes, for sure. That's definitely a mindset you could have with it. Absolutely. But it's more of like because like you're saying, like multiplayer, right? Commander is a social format. It's a very multiplayer heavy thing. You rarely ever do 1v1s, right?
Oh, I hardly ever play my 1v1.
Right. So like in a sense like this for a burn deck, you're gonna want things that hit the whole board. They're gonna be like your top picks for things that say each player, and even each with a deck like this, the life total doesn't matter until you're at 1.
Yeah.
So even a card like Flame Rift, right, which is just 2 mana, very simply deals 4 damage to each player. I've ended games with just that alone, where I've dealt, I think I've had a couple doublers on the board, dealt 12 damage to everyone else, but because Sulfin wasn't doubling it, it only dealt me maybe 6,
Okay.
and I was able to close the game out with just that.
Yeah, it definitely happens. So
It's rare though. Half the time you can burn yourself, so just be
yeah,
careful.
and that's the hard part about burn decks in general and group slug style decks is you got to make sure you don't kill yourself in the process of killing everyone else, or at the very least, make sure you kill yourself after you kill everyone else.
Exactly. Have that last damage just be where you're at.
Ugh. So burn is fun. What else is what do you say would be your next favorite aggro style deck?
Yeah, so we can move on in here to next bit, which would say is probably tribal. I
Oh
think we
boy.
can delve into that as tribal essentially being so there are a plethora of creature types out there, and tribal decks essentially are built in a way to emphasize that tribe. Like you want to just really focus on this creature type in particular. You want to build around its support, build around its mechanics. That kind of theme of I'm just going to make an army of whichever one of these creature types I want and go to town with it. Basically like your zombies, your dragons, elves, goblins.
And you
Those are
can't
just off the top
forget
of my head.
those dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, Dino Man here loves the dinosaurs.
So I know we've talked briefly before. I believe it was in the first episode when we were talking about our favorite deck types and all that.
Yep.
Why do we have tribal and why are we talking tribal in our aggro episode? I feel like tribal could you could end up having tribal. We could be talking about it again in our control or in our combo section.
Oh, it absolutely can. Many tribes excel in many different forms. With this one though, I'd say we got like our main staple tribe. I think like the two biggest ones that fall into this category, right? Of like which tribe fits best for this type of build. Like if you wanted to go have a heavy board state of big creatures. Actually, I think what they call it is like a battleship deck.
Yes.
Almost, I think, right? You've heard battleship, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So
I've heard that term before.
yeah, like I'm pretty sure that refers to like the big stompy, like your dinosaurs. And I know we both play Miram
Oh god,
actually, so
yes.
we can just go into Miram right here, like the dragon token crazy deck. Like that's probably the embodiment of just a straightforward battleship deck, right?
Yeah, And I know you and I both have Miram built similarly.
For the most part, yeah, I think.
But like I
We haven't
know.
actually compared lists yet. We got to compare lists at some point.
Oh God, that could take a whole episode.
Exactly. Like, let's see how. Oh, that's a good idea. Similar decks, yet built differently with the same commander. How can one commander be built differently in multiple ways? Okay, we're gonna jot that down. I'm gonna jot that down somewhere. Anyway, slight
Because
tangent. We love it.
I know for a fact you and I have the same commander multiple times, and
Yep.
I know my buddy Drace has a couple of the same commanders as me, but they're built completely different and they play completely different.
Oh, for
And
sure.
but with Miram, I would definitely say at least my build leans more on a combination of beat your face in with a bunch of dragons as I can, along with tokens.
Yep.
Um,
And for those who don't know, Miram, the full name is Miram Sentinel Worm. It's 3 colorless and green, blue, red. So it's a teamer dragon, which is actually one of the. I haven't seen too many big dragon staples in teamer.
oh God, no.
I don't recall. So she's got flying and ward 2, which ward is kind of their like more recent addition. It basically has like this creature can't be targeted by anything your opponents control unless they pay 2, right? So if like somebody wants to swords, swords to plowshares, exile it, they got to pay 2 extra mana on top of the 1, which is pretty hot.
Yeah.
And then the rest of her thing is what's the really fun part about Miram, which is why so many people play her. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except the token is not legendary if the dragon is legendary.
Yeah, that
Holy hot
is
damn!
straight up insane.
And
I
she's a
know.
6/6 on
Yeah,
top of it. She's a big girl. We love it.
like I know my deck. I have it built as I'm going to. I could play it two ways, and it all depends on how the cards are drawn. My ideal
Yep.
strategy is I'm going to make as many copies of Miram on that battlefield as I can. I think the most I've gotten on an in-table game is I was able to get 30 copies of Miram on the field.
It's
So,
amazing. What'd you use to do that? Because like, I
so
know of one spell that I have that's like the double major is the one I use that like
yep,
copies a creature, but then if the creature is legendary, the token isn't.
yeah.
Like what else do
So,
you use for that?
so you got cards. Kindred Discovery
Yep.
is a good card for any tribal deck if it has blue in it.
Oh, for sure.
But Reflections, Reflections of Litjara, which is a newer card from Kaldheim. Um, it pretty much states it's a 4 and a blue. It's for an enchantment. As Reflections of Litjar enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell. A copy of a permanent spell becomes a token. So, yes, you're not getting it immediately,
Right.
but and it's not triggering all the time for Miram. But if that's on the battlefield and you cast Miram, well, at that point, the legendary rule comes into effect, and you got to sacrifice one of them.
Yep.
Um,
We got ways around that though.
oh yes. Trying to think of the actual card name. It's
I'll
it's a
say
blue
Mirror
card.
Box
Mirror Box.
is one. That's kind of a newer one from that new Neon's or Kamigawa Neon Dynasty.
Yes. So you got cards like Mirror Box, which reads. If I could find it in here, my card profile. Yes. So Mirror Box is 3 colorless for an artifact. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. And each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1. Each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with the same name as that creature. So that's pretty insane. That's an easy way to get around the legendary rule. You
Yep.
also have a card called Mirror Gallery. It is a
Yeah, it's
older
like its
card.
first iteration, I think.
Yeah, it's for 5 colorless, and I want to say that card came out in Betrayers of Kamigawa, I think.
I believe so.
Um,
Yeah, it was a good few years back when like Commander wasn't really.
it was an
It was
afterthought.
still like in its heyday. I think it was still like coming into effect.
Yeah,
Like still trying to find its footing, because it didn't find its footing as one of the main staple formats until maybe 6-7 years ago, I think.
yeah. Um, but Mirror Gallery is a 5 colorless artifact, and all it states is the legend rule doesn't apply. So
It's a nice blanket effect. Hits everybody.
exactly. And I have both of those cards in my Miram deck in particular.
Very nice.
I also have cards like Door of Destinies, which
Yep.
is 4 colorless. You, as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, put a charge counter on Door of Destinies. And the subtext: creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each charge counter on the door. But for other, I mean, you got Reflections of Lajara, Kindred Discovery, Door of Destinies. Um, one of the other
So
ones.
like other token doublers too, right? Like things like Second Harvest,
Oh
for
God.
instance, is just like a simple two colors, 2 green. It's an instant, which is hilarious that you can just leave this up as a mono, like a green combat trick. Like say you're tapped out, you've swung at somebody to try to kill them, you took them out, you got another opponent coming your way. It's an instant that for each token you control, you make a token that's a copy of that permanent.
Yep.
So if you've got like even just 4 or 5 dragons out, you just made another token copy of each one, and a good number of them, from like what I've seen in our lists and like other stuff, a lot of them have crazy ETB effects. Like a lot of them do insane things when they enter the battlefield.
Oh God, yes. I mean, probably the 3 biggest cards I have in there that pretty much make my deck so dangerous is I have Primal Vigor, which is
Yep.
4 and a green enchantment. If one or more tokens would be put into the battlefield, twice that many tokens are put onto the battlefield instead. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature, twice that many are placed on that creature instead. Then I got Parallel Lives, 3 and a green for an enchantment. If an effect would put one or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many tokens instead. And then the Holy Grail that I have in there, the Almighty Doubling Season for 4 and a
So many
green.
effects.
Yes. If an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many tokens instead. Effect would create counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many counters on that permanent instead.
There's
So,
an ongoing theme here, folks. It just keeps going. It never ends.
so as you can see, just with some of those cards alone, how I can get up to 30 Mirums, how I can get up to a shit ton of other dragon cards right in the field.
Yep.
And with that, with the dragons in general, you're going to have cards. Let me look at this here. Okay. Yeah. So you have cards like Terror of the Peaks
Yep.
for 3 a red and a red for a 5/4 dragon creature with flying. Spells you opponents control, or spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peak deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So you got cards like that. Um, I mean, I could literally sit here and talk about dragons and dinosaurs for hours upon hours.
Oh, of course.
So I don't want to go too deep into it because I guarantee we're going to be having a full episode just on freaking dragons or dinosaurs. Um, but what I will say is some of the better cards I have in my dinosaur dragon deck, not dinosaur.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, you got cards like Dragon Speaker Shaman in there.
Yep.
One a red and a red for a 2/2 barbarian shaman. Dragon spells you cast cost 2 less to cost or cast. Then I got cards like Dragon Lord Servant for a 1 and a red for a 1/3 goblin shaman. Dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So you want to make those big, bulky frickin' dragons cheaper. Um,
Yeah, a lot of them dwell in the range of like 5 to maybe even 8 to 9 mana to
oh
cast
yeah,
them. There's
and
not too many that are any cheaper than maybe 4 mana to cast.
uh, I don't think so.
There's one 2-drop that's from the D&D set. That
Corlessa, Scale Singer.
Yeah, Corlessa is the only like green to blue. Play it's a 1/4. Lets you look at the top card. It lets you play dragons from the top of your library, which is fun.
Oh, it's great for a Miram style deck. I have her in
Yeah.
my deck.
Yep.
Um,
Same. It's good utility. Good way to just keep the top deck flowing.
exactly. And speaking of like the D&D style stacks or style cards from that set, I mean, I got card Thrakis the Butcher in there
Yep.
for 3 and Rakdos, or not Rakdos. Wow, Gruul.
My
Uh,
goodness.
it's some more in my coffee. It's not done yet. Um, Whenever Thrakis the Butcher attacks, double the power of each dragon you control until end of turn.
Yeah,
That
that just ends
is
the game right
crazy.
there.
But
Let me ask you, have you ever just like when playing this before, even just like playtest or like with other groups, just win out of nowhere through like Terror of the Peaks, Dragon Tempest effects, like where they just as soon as the dragon comes in, you just end up killing the board out of nowhere. You ever do that?
a lot.
Yeah, like I feel like it's crazy how like with the dragon deck, half the time I found myself just winning by playing the dragons, you know? Like almost half the time. It's almost like a near 50-50 split where I'll be playing my Miram deck and I'll play Dragon Tempest. It's a 2 mana, 1 colorless, 1 red. Gives your dragons haste when they enter the battlefield, or any creature with flying comes into play, gives it haste till end of turn. But then when a dragon ETBs or comes into play, it deals X damage, where X is the number of dragons you control. So, like in our deck, our Miram decks, by turn like 6 or 7, this thing is like one shot kill to most people.
Yeah, I mean, probably for me, I mean, I have with my Miram deck, I'd kill people with Astral Dragon. I've killed people with every dragon that I have in that deck. Um, one of my favorites is I have Ganax,
Yep,
Astral Hunter,
that's a really good one.
and an Astral Dragon in there. That's a fun little quick combo. But
Yeah,
probably the
Ganax is
one,
very good. Makes treasure.
yeah, probably the one that I have seen the most happen is with Terror of the Peaks on the board, Reflections of Lajara and Doubling Season all on the board.
Yep.
I can kill everyone as soon as I cast Astral Dragon.
Yeah, because that just makes 2 additional on its own. Plus, then you make a copy of that with Miram, which then makes another 2. And each of those entering, that triggers
Terror of
those
the Peaks.
effects multiple times.
Oh, and each time a creature enters the battlefield, Terror of the Peaks
Right.
deals 5 damage. Or,
Yeah, like
well,
that's
it'd be 4 damage for the first Astral Dragon, then 3 damage for the token creatures.
right. Which
But
then, like, usually that's. I actually don't know if I run a Terror of the Peaks yet or not, because I know I have the Dragon Tempest and Scourge of Valkis, which do it based on number of dragons you control.
yes.
Which I've seen that get out of hand because, like, we're making tokens, we're copying dragons. One dragon comes in, counts all those. The next dragon comes in, counts all them plus another one. Next dragon comes in, counts it again, and it's like like it's just multiplying it over and
Oh,
over, which is insane.
it gets bad. And I mean, unfortunately, a card like Terror of the Peaks, it is definitely on the more expensive end right now. It's
Looking at
hovering,
$50 on Card Kingdom right now.
yeah, it's hovering right around
It's
$50.
yeah, it's a lot.
I want to say when M21 came out, I pulled it from a pack.
Yeah, you got
um,
lucky with that one. I still don't have one yet.
yeah, I mean, then you got cards like Ancient Copper Dragon too, which that card is certainly not budget by any means,
Now
but
it's like $80.
yeah. And I remember when it first came out, they were the local game store by my house was pre-selling it for like $120, and that was just the basic version.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds about right.
but I got lucky enough that because it was the D&D set, I bought a box of it, and I ended up pulling two from that pack, and I ended up
Yeah.
selling one of them, but I had to keep one of them just for Miram
Oh,
alone.
absolutely.
Because for those that don't know, Ancient Copper Dragon is 4 a red for a 6/5 flying Elder Dragon. Whenever Ancient Copper Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. You create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result. And for
Which,
those
yeah,
that
once that connects, you can just win the game.
yeah, and for those that don't know, treasure tokens it's just essentially extra mana.
Yep. You tap it, sack it. You make a color. You make a mana of any color.
Exactly.
It's just free mana, basically. It's like, oh hey, it's free real estate.
Exactly. Want to play some Monopoly? Well, guess what?
There
I
you
win the
go.
board.
So
So
now, I mean, I don't play dinosaurs. I know you play dinosaurs. You mentioned it. How does the dragon deck differ in any way from the dinosaur deck? As
so
like, I know we mentioned those are like the two top battleship decks. So like, what's kind of like what separates them in a
yeah,
sense?
so my dragon deck it definitely focuses more well with Miram in general. I
Yep.
focus more on tokens and those big bad dinosaur or dragon creatures with ETBs.
Right.
Um, right now, my main dinosaur deck is Zakama Primal Calamity. He's a hefty or she's a hefty girl at
Mm-hmm.
6 a red, green, and white for a 9/9 Elder Dinosaur from the first Ixalan set. She has Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and when she enters the battlefield, if you cast it, untap all lands you control. And then in the subtext, you got 2 in a red, Zakama deals 3 damage to target creature, 2 in a green, destroy target artifact or enchantment, 2 in a white, you gain 3 life. So I kind of have her built up. Now, it's been a long time since I even updated her.
Yeah, I
But
haven't seen dinos in a while.
no, I haven't played her in a while. Um, but essentially, my whole goal of her is to cheat out a bunch of big dinosaurs. And
Okay.
a lot of those dinosaurs, they're not ETBs like my dragons are,
Mm-hmm.
but they got stuff. I have stuff in there like Atali Primal Storm, 4 red and red for a 6/6 Elder Dinosaur. Whenever Atali attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So I got cards like Atali in there. I got Waking Sun's Avatar is in there, which is 5 a white, and a white for 7/7 dinosaur avatar. And when she enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand, everything that's not a dinosaur is dead. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's always fun. We love one-sided board wipes.
oh god, yeah. So
So good. It's such a good mechanic to run.
yeah, so with my Zakama deck, it's the quintessential aggro style deck where I'm literally just praying that I can get your life total to 0 before you get mine too. Whereas my dragon deck, I could play around and fuck with you a little bit because I know I can easily win in one turn with that deck. My dinosaur deck, on the
Right.
other hand, if I'm hit with a board wipe, it's gonna be a little bit hard. Um,
Right, like, so like dinosaurs is kind of more of like a slow build up. Like you got to ramp a lot. You got to kind of take a
yeah,
few turns to get there. It could take you like 6 or 7 turns to maybe get a couple good dinosaurs on the board.
exactly. And especially with a card like Zakama, like there's
Yeah.
been some better dinosaur or dinosaur tribal commanders that have come out recently. Um, like you have Atla Polini Nest Tender, uh, one red, green, white for a 2/3 human shaman, and two in a tap create a 0/1 green egg creature token with Defender. And it reads whenever an egg you control dies, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you got cards like that. Then you got cards like the new commander from Ixalan, Pantlaza, Sun Favored, two a red,
Yep.
green, white. Whenever Pantlaza or another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may discover X, where X is that creature's toughness. Do this only once each turn. And for
Yeah,
those that
dinosaurs
don't,
got a lot of good love.
yeah. And the one that I'm building currently, just to kind of change it up a little bit,
Hmm.
is Owen Grady Raptor Trainer and Blue Loyal Raptor.
Ah, yes, the ever loving Jurassic Park themed cards.
I mean,
I was actually very excited to see those. I love Jurassic Park. I'm a huge
oh,
fan of the films. The
it
early films, the newer ones are a little, you know,
yeah,
whatever. But
it's probably one of my all-time favorite film franchises, right up there
yeah,
with Star Wars and Lord of the
oh yeah,
Rings.
I'm waiting for
But
them to do a Star Wars Secret Lair or a Star Wars Universes Beyond. If they do that, I'm just gonna drop my wallet and be like, "Here you go."
yeah, I mean, I felt the same way when I saw Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
Um, but if Star Wars ever came to Magic, I'd be in my glory. I know Marvel is
right.
coming to Magic, so there's a chance we could be seeing Star Wars, especially since
Yeah, if
Disney
Disney's
owns
gonna
Star
let
Wars.
right. Yeah, if Disney's gonna let them do Marvel, then I can't imagine why they wouldn't, let them do that.
I mean, I hope to see Star Wars eventually. But d- dinosaurs as a whole, they're I have a love hate relationship with them as a
Hmm.
tribal because they're not as fast as dragons,
Right,
and
like
they're
dragons can have that explosive one
yeah,
turn where like I just won. You
yeah.
know?
The hard thing with dinosaurs is there's there's been a lot of support for them recently,
Yep.
but there isn't like that one commander you look at and be like, yes, that is a dinosaur commander.
I know they
Like there
printed
is with
Gishath a couple
dragons.
times, but
Yeah,
I think Gishath would be the only close one that's just off the top of my head. That's the only one I can think of.
yeah. Even Gishath though, it's not like she was. Oh, what the hell is the right word? A oh, I know you know what word I'm thinking of, but I can't place it right now. Um, oh, it's not like it's a Vanquisher Spanner on a stick. Um,
Oh yeah, like it doesn't just pump all the
yeah, like an
right.
Edgar
Okay, I got what you're
Markov.
saying.
Um,
Right, but I mean, get the original Gishath from the first Ixalan though. It did let you play dinos for free though. I'm pretty sure.
yes,
Right, like you would deal damage and it would just plop out some dinos to have a big turn next turn.
yeah. So I mean, you definitely have cards that can help out with that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but it's obviously dragons have been around since the beginning of Magic.
Well, yeah, Elder Dragon Highlander. It's
Exactly, the original
dragons have
Elder
been the main
Dragons.
staple.
I mean, that was the whole reason why the format was created because the uh, the judges wanted to play a game where they could actually use the Elder Dragons.
Yeah, those
But
OG ones like Nicol Bolas, Chromia, a
yeah, exactly.
few others.
And dinosaurs are a lot of fun,
Yeah,
but I don't
it's
think
it's in no means a bad deck to
No.
build or a bad strategy. It's a very viable, super fun strategy to play.
Yes, but
The playstyle is just different, I think, right?
yeah, it is. In my mindset, with where Magic is right now, dinosaurs are never going to be as powerful as dragons, or even as the lower power and toughness of something like goblins or elves.
Well,
Um,
those decks have a very different strategy.
yes, they definitely have a different strategy, but if we're talking just straight tribal,
Yeah,
dinosaurs have a long way to go before they're even close to as good as those ones. Just
they
because
need a bit more support.
in the grand scheme of things, I don't think, from my knowledge, dinosaurs really only started coming out in Ixalan in mass numbers.
Yep,
Um,
that's I mean, we had a few like lizards, like big lizards, but they weren't called dinosaurs until Ixalan. So you're right
yes,
on that.
and obviously, due to the age, I mean, Ixalan only came out in what, 2018? The first one, that
Somewhere
is.
around that.
Uh, not Lost Caverns. Where's the original one here?
2017.
2017.
Yep.
So compare that to creatures like dragons or elves. They've been around since the beginning of the game. So since the 90s. So they got
Yeah.
30 plus years of cards that commander or that people can use to add to their decks, where dinosaurs are more recent. I'm hoping that we see more and more dinosaurs being brought out. But
I think we will. I think it's
yeah,
got enough popularity. Like enough people love dinosaurs. There's a lot of us, old Jurassic Park fans who love dinos and want to see that tribe flourish.
I mean, I would love to see dinosaurs sort of be like the pseudo dragons that
Yep.
they should be. Um, Obviously, I don't want to see them start putting wings on every single dinosaur so they get flying and all that. But I think they definitely need a little bit more love.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, it's just not there yet. And
Right.
they're, in terms of like power scale, I don't put dinosaurs even close to dragons, which is part of the reason why I've kind of shied away from playing my Zakama a lot. Because even my Zakama deck, that when I first built her during the first Ixalan, she was fairly finely tuned. But now I look at her and look at some of the precons, and I think I'd have a hard time keeping up with some of the precons with her, with how she's built in her current state.
Right. I
Um,
mean, that's something that we can just like, yeah, that comes from playtests and getting through the motions of like a group and really trying to see
oh yeah,
where that deck falls into. Which that's an episode for a later date
oh yeah.
is power levels and
I mean, the high
such like
CMC
that.
of Zakama definitely plays a factor into it. I
It,
mean,
it provides for a slower set of
yeah,
gameplay. You got to add more ramp and you got to really take a couple turns to get the gears turning. I think with that one,
oh yeah, because I mean,
where I
she's
think
a
that can,
total of
yep,
nine mana to cast.
right, like that makes it differ a lot from like an elf or goblin tribal deck, which that's a pretty good segue into those where they have extremely cheap costed creatures, and
Oh god, yeah.
the dichotomy between an elf deck and a goblin deck is like I have I play elves. I have my mono green elf ball deck, but there's someone in my play group. Their name is Cassidy. They play a goblin deck, and we've even gone back and forth on. I think we played one game back to back where I played elves, and then they played their goblin deck and completely smashed the board after I won with elves. So they're like, "Oh, the goblin deck isn't as you know nutty as the elf deck. The elf deck is so tuned." And so they play goblins, and they won on the exact same number of turns that I won with elves.
Oh yeah.
It was like turn 4 or 5. They had completely overrun the board with goblins.
Now let me guess. They were
So
using
it's
Krenko, Mob Boss.
no, actually, they Oh, hold on. I gotta actually honestly don't remember which goblin they use. Hold on. Krenko is in there for sure. So Krenko is that 2 mana, 2 red that they use
Well, I
in the
mean,
deck. I think it's Muxus. I
oh,
think
Muxus, Goblin Grandee there. Uh,
Goblin Grandee. Yeah.
Reveal the
So
top 6 cards of your library. Put all Goblin creature cards with converted mana cost 5 or less onto the battlefield.
uh-huh. Yep.
Dude, that's insane.
Yep. They either use that
Because
one or it's I don't think it's Bashilic Mons. That's one they've used to kill us though. Bashilic Mons is 2 in the red. Whenever it or another goblin dies, Bashilic Mons deals 1 damage to any target. So like they use that to get the ball rolling. But I'm pretty sure Muxus is the commander. I have to double check it with them later on.
yeah, we'll put it in the show notes later for those
Yeah.
that are watching or interested. But goblins, they are. We look at elves, and you look at the stereotypical elf ball, mono green, or sometimes even Selesnya, or uh, my favorite, Golgari elves. But
Yep, the black green is very good.
with goblins, they're almost like when I think of burn, I think goblins.
Right, like you can definitely put the two together in a sense that they're going to run very similar effects. Like their goal is going to be very much the same way, except one's going to do a multiple creatures and some other crazy effects like that, for
I
sure.
mean, yeah, with the goblins, I mean, Christ, a lot of the creatures, or even saying, "Oh, you ping
Yep,
damage just for being on the field."
yep.
Um, and goblins have so much support with anthem style effects. That's the word I was looking for earlier when we were
Oh,
talking
anthems, yeah,
dinosaur
when they
anthems. Um,
like they're lords, so to speak, right?
yes,
Because
the
they've got like
lords.
Goblin
Yep.
King and Goblin Chief,
Then you got Goblin Trash Master.
Goblin Trash Master. Yeah, basically they're just things that like give them other elves +1/+1, which elves has also.
Yes,
Like they've
elves
been
has it a
those
lot.
two, yeah, they've been like neck and neck almost. Like every time goblins get something, they give elves something too.
Oh yes, I
It's
mean,
insane.
I wasn't playing during the original days, so I can't speak too much on the history of goblins and elves, but I know those are two of the earliest tribes to come out. Um,
Yep.
and right now, the 3 most popular decks for tribal type decks are dragons, elves, and zombies.
Yeah,
And
zombies is that other one that's really good too. They got a lot of fun support.
oh my god, especially if you want to go Demir colorway.
Yeah, like I think my favorite one for that one is Scarab God, which from the Amonkhet. Like I love Scarab God so much, dude.
Yep.
He's 3 in Demir,
Yep,
right?
3
He's a 5
Demir
cost.
for
Yeah, and
5/5.
yep,
And at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control.
yeah. Even that alone, like he's got other bits, but like that alone right there can just end the game.
Oh yeah, and like as you know, my Urtai deck, my Urtai control deck. Not going to get too much into the control aspect, but it has a very heavy zombie tribal feel to it.
Right, like you run
Because
Scarab God, don't you, in there as like a win con?
oh yeah, Scarab God's in there as a
Yeah,
win con. Um, I also have all the zombie style lords in there: Diagraph Captain, Death
yep.
Baron, Lord of the Accursed. I got all those. Um, but
Yeah, it's like those are the tribes that like they focus really on like flooding the board with as many creatures as possible. And that's I
oh
think
yeah,
what separates them from like the battleship strategies we were talking about, where really with like maybe not Miram in particular, but like your typical dinosaur deck or like other dragon style deck, you're really only gonna have maybe 3 to 4, maybe 5 big, beefy, tank boys out there that are like high power toughness and they just smash face. Whereas like the zombie deck, the sliver, well, the zombie deck, the elf deck, the goblin deck, those guys, they're gonna flood the board with as many of those creatures as possible.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention slivers. I love slivers. That's on me though.
Slivers is one of those tribals that everyone wants to build,
I love it. I love my sliver deck
but
so much.
no one really wants to play, because if you play Slivers, it's just like if you're running Eldrazi Tribal, you're going to be a target immediately.
Well, so
Because
let's dig into that a little bit then. Let's dig if we
yeah,
must dig into.
let's talk about
So
Slivers for a little bit here.
okay, so yeah, so for those that don't know, slivers are a tribe that's been around for the longest of times, and there's actually been some videos out there about their nature, so to speak. I think one is Magic Archives or like Lore Magic. This guy's got a nice, awesome YouTube channel out there. I apologize if I butchered the name of it, but he goes in and he like does like a deep dive into like the history of slivers and where they come from and why they are where they are.
Speaking of that,
It's
that will
fantastic.
be linked in the show description as well, guys.
Yeah, if we can find that, I'm sure we can. The guy's great. He's got the mustache, like the mustache minute. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep, I know exactly the.
Yeah,
guy
no,
you're
he's
talking
fantastic.
about.
I love that guy. But so slivers basically they're like a hive mind, so to speak. So their whole main mechanic and thing is that whatever one sliver does, it gives it to every other sliver that either you control or that's in play. Because we've gotten two separate forms of slivers here over the years. There were the original set that didn't change until I want to say Modern Magic 13, I believe, or somewhere around that. Yeah, like M13 is when they started introducing slivers with a new mechanic. Originally, it was every sliver affected every sliver.
Yes.
So you'd have one like Thorn Sliver, as an example. It's a mono green one, and it gives slivers trample. That's every sliver in play. If your opponent's playing slivers, they get trample too. Your guys, they get trample. And that didn't change until several years later when they altered the design of them and they gave them the new mechanic of every sliver you control.
Yep.
So they kind of, yeah, like they switched it around from, okay, now it's not just blanket every sliver, now it's just slivers you control, which I kind of thought was a weird one because it kind of broke their pure hive mind eness.
Yeah, I mean, it broke
You
the
know?
whole hive mind type of thing. And
Yeah.
when I originally first played against the Sliver deck, I was like, oh, I can see that's their weakness. If they're playing against another Sliver deck, the other opponent is going to have the same stuff. And that was one of those
two-way street there, yeah.
And now when they switched that, I was kind of like, oh. And you see it, especially like in the recent commander deck that they put out that was focused on slivers.
Yep. They did just get a new precon, which is fantastic. I still got to get pieces from it too, actually. I don't have the pieces for that yet. I didn't get around to buying it. I still have to.
Yeah, I'm tempted to get it for myself, but
do it.
Slivers is one of those. Yeah, Slivers is one of those decks where you're going to be a target almost immediately, just like Eldrazi. Dragons are another one where you're usually targeted immediately, so you better be quick. But like Jack was saying, slivers, every sliver gets the abilities essentially.
Yeah.
So
yep.
You got cards like Venom Sliver,
yep,
which gives every sliver Death Touch that you control. Then you got Siphon Sliver. Every sliver you control gains Lifelink. Like, it's one of those. I look at slivers like they're a deck for everything.
They're very toolbox, I think.
Exactly.
That's kind of how I've built mine. So slivers have a lot of legendaries that they can use, and they're all 5 color, mind you. Yep. So a true good sliver EDH, and this is where you might break the bank a little bit, is they're all 5 color, and there's so many of them. We could fill an episode with just going over the many different ones. So I'll just briefly mention the ones that I use. And for my commander, it's Sliver Overlord.
Yep.
Right, which he's the Wooburg. He's one of each color.
One of the originals.
Yep. Oh yeah, he's one of the OGs. He's fantastic, and he's got basically two main abilities that each cost three to activate. Like three of any color, so three, generic mana. You either tutor for a sliver, so you search your deck for any sliver card that you want, put it into your hand, and the other one, which is one that I don't use as often, but it's definitely one that there are a lot of strategies out there where like someone else's sliver over will use this, and it's three generic. Take control of target sliver. So I
Yep.
do run a couple of things that like one of the really cheeky ways you can do this is you can turn your opponent's commander into a sliver with a couple different effects. There's an enchantment I have that you can pay one, turn a creature into a creature type that's not a wall, which is very funny. That's specific. But you can, make your opponent's commander a sliver, use Overlord. Now you control that creature forever. It's not until the end of the turn. That is now your sliver.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there's a special little subtyping or sub type there that says this effect doesn't end at the end of turn, which is
Yeah.
different from a lot of the other theft style mechanics in the game.
Right. Yeah. Sliver Overlord is like, no, you're a sliver now. You're part of the hive. Come on,
I
join
mean,
the club.
unfortunately, if you're running a sliver deck, you're gonna be hard pressed to make it a budget style deck.
It took me years to really even get to where I am today, just on the mana base alone. To be
The
honest, a lot of slivers on their own are cheap, but the mana base is what killed me.
Yeah, the mana base is gonna be the expensive part in
Yep.
any five color deck, and in an episode in the future, once we go over everything else that we want to get over first, the different archetypes, then we'll start talking about the colors.
Yep.
Then we'll start
Then we
going
can go into
into
like,
mana bases. Um,
yeah,
and
I
we'll
think like,
talk about how to correctly build a mana base for something like a sliver deck.
oh
And
yeah,
chances are, when we do the five color one, we're probably going to be talking about slivers. Uh,
yep,
just because it's the one most people want to build for five color. And
it's a good one.
it's one of the most difficult. And Jack, I know you and we've talked off recording and giving people a little bit of a peek into our mindset.
Hmm.
So, what we're thinking for the next few episodes is we want to go over the rest of the archetypes
Yep, very in
and
depth, very just like
just,
today, like deep dive into those.
yeah, and just talking and bullshitting our way through them. And
Yeah,
once we get done with the archetypes, and we got two or three left after this episode here, I'm thinking we're probably going to do a deep dive into the different colors, meaning the monocolors that are available: white, blue, black, red, green. And then we'll start going into the multicolor ones. And when we're in the multicolor ones, especially, we'll talk best cards. We'll make sure we talk best cards to throw in there for lands and how to build a mana base. But I'm
yeah, I just like your
thinking,
basic stuff. I think,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm thinking, Jack, before we get into that stuff,
Hmm.
or maybe shortly after, or in between, we will probably end up talking about mana bases in general. Um, because as we go into actually building decks, it's going to be a point where we need this stuff out in the open and our mindset. That way, each episode, we're not sitting there talking, oh, well, we need this many exactly. And so we're not repeating ourselves. What do you think about that?
I am totally down for doing a deck theory and deck build tips and tricks and things like that. I think that's a good way to segue, like to combine, to kind of like cornerstone the archetypes. I think that's probably what we can do there is like we get through the archetypes and we kind of like bundle it all up, wrap it up in a nice bow of like, okay, so deck build theory, neat ways to do it, stats.
Exactly. And then when we start going into individual colors, we can start doing a deep dive into one commander that we like for that
Yep.
deck. And we can go through and we'll sit down and we'll tell you how Jack and I would build this deck.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I'll publish all the lists for the decks on whether it's uh, one of the formats we use. I use a lot of Moxfield for
Yeah,
myself.
Moxfield is very good.
So I will probably end up publishing the list on Moxfield for each deck that we build up. That way, for those of you that are listening and you want to go back and take a look at what we're talking about and see each card and their artwork, you can go ahead and right there and click it. And Moxfield has a neat feature where if we talk and we build a deck, Jack and I together here, and you want to buy it, you can literally go right to our Moxfield link and click buy,
There you go.
and it's going to buy it for you. So
These will be very budget decks too, mind you. Like these are going to be, we're going to try to keep these probably, what do you say, like in the $100 range, maybe even less.
we're going to try and keep them as cheap as possible.
Yeah, like definitely under $100. We're not going to be going over that.
There's going to be certain decks that are going to be more expensive.
Yeah.
Like when we go into the 5-color and more of the multi-color decks, they'll probably be a little bit more expensive. But all the mono-color decks that we do and we talk about, we're going to keep it under $100 for you.
Oh, absolutely. Very easily to do.
And even some of the guild decks, we'll probably be able to keep those under 100.
I think so. Yeah, you can do budget mana bases. We'll get into budget mana base.
Oh, without a doubt. But
Yeah.
and we'll make a announcement before we start talking. There's gonna be certain decks that Jack and I talk about and we build that him and I are both gonna say, nope, we want to make this the best deck possible. And it's gonna be budget, but it's not gonna be under $100.
So you want to pick my competitive brain then? That's the.
Oh yes, and I'm not
All right.
talking CEDH style decks.
Well, no, I'm not doing any more CEDH. Those days are behind me. I refuse to. Well, it's not. I'm just trying to stretch away from that. I have a bad history of being too competitive and making decks too what they call meta. I want to avoid that.
But that's the big thing for us. We don't want to make any of these decks feel like they're CEDH.
Right, it's kitchen table, it's fun. End of the day, you want the whole group to have fun, right?
Exactly. And we're going to be trying to build, when we talk about our deck builds that we're doing for the first set here, all of the monocolor decks, they will be able to play against each other. All of the 2-color decks, they'll be able to play each other, and so on and so forth. And we're going to do our best to even include like the 5-color style decks able to play against the mono white deck, for example. It's definitely not going to be easy, especially once we get into the higher cost decks. But we want to make it so if you or your friends pick up these decks that we build, you can choose any one of the 32 or 36 color combinations, and you'll be able to play against each other without any issues. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of work for Jack and myself to try and figure this out. But with that, I think that is just about the end for today here. We appreciate everyone listening to us ramble on about our favorite card game. And
hell yeah.
For now, we leave you with a question. If you had to choose your favorite color in Magic, what would it be?
That's a toughie.
Shoot us a message on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or even in the comments on the show. And we're taking a poll to see what it is in our early days.
We might just talk about that one first. Like with most popular color, that'll probably be the first one we go into, I think.
Exactly. We're not going to go in any sort of particular order.
Nope.
But we're definitely going to start with the monocolors first.
Yeah. Big color theory, big color pie.
Oh, yes. But once we're into the monocolors, the guilds, we're not going to just go Azorius, Demir, Rakdos, Gruul, Selesnya, Orzhov, etc., etc., etc. We're going to just go whatever we feel like talking about. And
Yep.
that's the glory here. But
Very
before we
smooth
start...
and natural.
Oh, yes. And before we start rambling on too much longer here, we will see you guys all later. Have a great day, guys.
One, everybody.
And thanks for watching and listening to the Lotus Archive.